The middle class is almost gone. If you're feeling broke as many people out there today, you're not alone. When you look at adjusted inflationary rates, of course, the average inflation costs of some goods, I don't know, let's just say a car. The average back in 1970 was around $10,000. Today, we're about $90,000. The unfortunate part is the wages haven't kept up. And when we think about a lot of the cost of living crisis today, it's no joke. I mean, the average wage today is anywhere from $70 to $80 to $90, $100,000. And while that might seem like a lot, when you consider the average vehicle nowadays costs anywhere from 60, 70, 80 grand itself, that's virtually a year's worth of salary to pay for that vehicle. Yes, unfortunately, your feeling of broke is not just an illusion. Welcome back to the hustle, everybody, and welcome back to the grind. And it's a sad state to talk about this because as we retire or we kind of trug our way through life, enjoying the little things in life, the smell of the roses, the fresh cut grass, and sometimes that first frost on the morning ground. You know what? Not all is that horrible, but let's be quite honest. I mean, a lot of people are struggling to make ends meet today. Everywhere you look, you hear about the cost of living crisis, things going up in cost. Wages aren't climbing. I mean, in the same time where we've seen an 8 to 900% cumulative increase in the cost of living between 1970 to today, 2025. That's right. Unfortunately, in that same time frame, wages have really only gone up by, 2 to 3 times, in some cases 4 to 5 times. Regardless, suffice it to say, wages haven't kept up anywhere near the cost of living increases. So what does that really mean for all of us? Well, what it means is this whole concept of being a middle class, the median wages and falling in the bulk sum of the population, which at one point back in 1970 was up in that 67 to 70% of the population was considered middle class. Well, guess what? Today, we're down to about closer to 40%. Yes, we've been sliding, and that's a comparison when you talk about cost of living versus the median incomes. Yes, it doesn't paint a very nice picture, and for a lot of people that are just trying to get by day to day, retirement is just a pipe dream. Surviving is just a pipe dream. We look around, and I can speak certainly in Canada, when I look around, wages or the cost for food has been going through the roof. It's absolutely astronomical how much people are paying for food these days. It's at the point where people aren't even buying real food. As a matter of fact, have you heard the latest? That the federal government has actually advocating for the idea of synthetic meats. That's right, synthetic meats. Why? Well, I guess because they can. There's clearly a market need or requirement for it. But more importantly, they're probably going to come with a product that's a little bit cheaper. To grow cattle, to grow chickens. That costs money, time, investment. But unfortunately, there was a time when you would take the family out for a nice, chicken dinner. You'd go grab a little Kentucky Fried Chicken or chicken on the way. And I remember those days way back in the 70s and the 80s growing up. And it was a cheap and dirty, but it was good. It was tasty and you got your protein. The unfortunate part now is very few people are getting true protein. They're having to rely on other cheap sources like beans and nuts because a lot of the meats are getting astronomically priced. And I look around, I think, I've heard the latest, there's commentary that the price of chicken is about to get skyjacked up to another 20 to 30% increase here very, very shortly in Canada. All I can do is ask myself, why? How does this keep happening? I mean, in Canada, it really feels like the large food conglomerates are really part of a major monopoly. A monopoly which effectively controls the prices. Same with cars. You think you're going to get a good deal? I mean, I look around and I can't help but think, now that we've finally crested $50,000 for the average price of a vehicle, at least in the US, in Canada, it's closer to $60,000. That's the average. That's what people are paying on average transaction price. That's right. There's cheaper vehicles. Sure, you can buy yourself a $40,000 car these days. Not too many. But unfortunately, we see these prices rising. 80, 90, 100 grand. Pickup trucks now for $130,000. The cost of vehicles is cost prohibitive. Very few people are actually able to afford it. And many would argue that cars, trucks, SUVs are The affordability aspect are a thing of the past. People are no longer going to be able to afford to buy a new car. It's going to be a bit of a lifestyle of either renting, leasing, short-term, Lyft, Uber, and all of those types of services just to get you around. Public transportation. I know in Canada they're talking about 15-minute cities, but we're not going down that path. I will say the idea is create the poverty, create the problems, and then come up with somebody's unique solution. Unfortunately, the idea of growing up and having a basic amenity, like an affordable lunch, dinner for the family, 3-course. We used to talk about breakfast, lunch, and supper, right? Back in the days, you're lucky if you get one good meal these days. And that's just a sign of the times. So when we're talking about the middle class, it's literally shrinking. The numbers are there to prove it. There's less people that are falling within the median, many, many more following well below it. Why? Because of the cost of food, the cost of medication or healthcare costs. Of course, we see in the US what's going on, in Canada what's going on. And certainly in Canada, even though they say we have this relatively free public type healthcare, honestly, I know so many people that struggle to get into a doctor. You can't get your own family doctor. If you want to even go to a clinic and hope for a song and a dance that a doctor is just experienced enough to look at you, the problem with that is you can wait 12, 14, 20 hours just to get in to see a doctor sometimes. Worst part is, a lot of times, it's not just the doctor. You get in to see the doctor, then it's another wait for another 6 months to get into a specialist, then another 12 months to get into some other kind of diagnostic testing. And so this just goes round and around. And a lot of people, I know certainly in the US feel that the Canadian public health care is absolutely amazing. We pay for it through taxes. Again, another cost of living increase, thus dropping that affordability here drastically to the floor. And so it is truly just a change, a shift in the tide, that what we're seeing today is not what we're seeing back in the 70s and 80s. Now, this isn't about boomers having it so lucky. Gen Xers, we're all living through this. I mean, there's boomers around today. There's even older people living, in their 90s and 100s. They're dealing with a lot of this cost of living crisis. They're getting benefits stripped away from them every single day. They're even talking about some of those costs. OAS is being scrutinized right now is because it's one of the biggest line items here in the government budget. And so there's discussions about that going away or getting stripped down. There's discussions about raised taxes, reduced benefits for old timers, reduced benefits for everybody. In the meantime, we're seeing job deterioration or the job climate sort of shrinking. And while some people say, I know last month they said, we just saw 67,000 new jobs produced in Canada. We're seeing varying different stories in the US, but they don't tell the whole story because a lot of the jobs that were initially lost before that in Canada were full-time quality jobs. People got their walking papers. But now, unfortunately, what's happened is these 67,000 new jobs are largely part-time temporary jobs just in anticipation for the season. Christmas time, kiosks, small part-time jobs that just won't last. And while some people are good with that as we age sometimes, especially a lot of retirees like to have the opportunity to maybe work those short-term gigs, not everybody does. A lot of people just need to have a full-time job, which is harder to come by these days. So when we talk about the middle class shrinking, it's really no joke. I see this all the time. The affordability crisis is real. Repossessions are on the rise. Car repos, don't even go there. I know people in the car business that tell me all the time they're seeing lineups of these vehicles showing up on the backs of these trucks coming from the auction that were just scooped up because of people getting repossessed. I'm talking not just luxury vehicles like Range Rovers and BMWs. I'm talking everyday cars, people, families. They buy a vehicle like a Toyota Highlander or a Camry or a Honda Accord because they feel that that's what they need for the family, and they're feeling the wrath of repossessions. House repos, also on the rise. Cost of living, food, medication, it's just all rising at an alarming rate. And it's outrunning the pace of earnings. What does the future look like as we transition from 60, 70% in the median of income versus cost of living all the way down maybe somewhere closer to the 40% range? What does that look like in 5 to 10 years from now? As we see prices continue to skyrocket, inflation rising, taxation rising, it's clear that things are not looking all that great. But this again brings me to the idea of, hustling around, the hustle and the grind and the matrix. And that's all we do is chase the dollar, just looking for the next opportunity to try to climb the ladder for what? Just to move up the rung. And we know in Canada, taxation is a rising number. So in other words, it means that as you earn more, they tax you even harder and harder and harder. It's pointless almost to even work overtime. Rather, as a retiree, I've realized if you can set yourself up in a position where you can earn just enough to get by, you've got enough cash flow, you pay for your house, it's done, you don't get into big car loans, you can actually live a life that's much more fruitful. And I look around here, this is an example of what life should actually be. While people are out hustling, stressing out of the big mortgage payments. See, unfortunately, that's one of the biggest wealth killers, is big houses that are far bigger than you need, expensive cars that are beyond your means. That's what's costing people dearly. But instead, if you can get past that, if you can get paid, buy a moderate house, own a car that you can afford, that you pay either cash or it's debt free. Try to find those little wins and then enjoy life. See, because as I look around on a beautiful morning like this, it's frosty, it's about -5. There's no wind, it's gorgeous. And I look around, I see the ice is frozen on the lake. I see the birds are standing there on the ice. I'm hearing all the birds chirping, and I can't help but think, this is what life is about. Going for these glorious morning walks, getting out of the hustle and grind, because it's that hustle and grind that keeps people impoverished. The system is designed to keep you cycling over and over, earn, spend, earned, spend, and it never goes away. But if you can get out of that cycle of earn, spend, and just earn a little bit, spend very little, sometimes maybe you can switch that ratio of cost of living to earnings in a way that now you can actually live and enjoy life. Spend time with your family. Give your loved ones a big hug. Give them a big hug and a kiss and say thanks for being there for me. Go out there. Enjoy some of the fruits of nature. Enjoy some of the beauty of nature has to hold. Maybe go for that short little car ride. Go for a cruise. Crank up the music. Go for a bike ride. Maybe go for a walk. Whatever it is, find those little wins in your life. And it's getting out of that rat race that is the biggest win, because it's the rat race that continually feeds that need to spend. And as we spend, we get caught up in the cycle. Food, sure, we need that. The basic essentials, medication, we need that. But save that for the money that you have, rather than spending it on pointless ventures. That way, when you need the medication, when you need some of the food, you have a little bit extra because you haven't been overspending on that oversized house, stuck with, $2,200, $3,000, $4,000 a month mortgage payments. That's the last thing you need. But anyway, thanks again so much, everybody. Just a quick talk. Things are interesting. Things are changing. And I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. Again, as always, check out that video. Very, very popular. You're going to love that one. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. Bye-bye.